I had nowhere to go. No job, no savings, no dignity. When my sister lied about me, twisting everything to paint me as the villain, my dad kicked me out. The last words I heard from him were, "Let's see how long she lasts out there." The sting of it still burns. But I came back. And this time, I wasn't the same person. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. The knock on the door didn't feel like a knock. It was more like the final nail being hammered into a coffin. I had spent the last year of my life clawing for something, anything, that would make me feel like I wasn't just existing. I was 53, living in my dad's house again after my second divorce, working a low-paying job at the local grocery store. My career was in shambles. My self-esteem, if I'm honest, had been shattered for a while. "Mom's been asking about you again," my sister Claire had said earlier that day. I could see the smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth. Claire was the golden child, the one who did everything right, at least in Dad's eyes. She had the perfect job, the perfect family, the perfect life. I could never seem to measure up. It stung, but I had learned to live with it. And then it all came crashing down. It was a Wednesday night, around 8 p.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a bowl of half-eaten cereal in front of me, scrolling through job listings on my phone. I was going to change my life. I had to. But I could barely focus on the screen when I heard Dad's voice in the hallway. "Claire told me what you said about Mom," he said, his voice tight with disbelief. "I can't believe you'd go that far." I froze. I had no idea what he was talking about. "That's not what I said," I snapped, pushing my chair back. "She's twisting everything." But the words felt weak, like I was trying to convince myself more than him. Dad stood in the doorway, his thick brows furrowed. "I don't want to hear any more excuses. You're out of this house." "What?" I gasped, standing up. "You're kicking me out because of a lie?" "It's not just this lie," he said, his voice cool. "It's the years of lies, the drama. I can't keep dealing with it. Claire has a family to support. You need to figure things out on your own." I stared at him, my mouth open, but no words coming out. This wasn't happening. "You'll see how long she lasts," he added, his words like daggers. "Let's see how long she lasts without us." I didn't argue anymore. I grabbed a few things from my room, feeling the weight of every item, each one a reminder of how far I had fallen. Before I left, I glanced at Claire, standing silently by the door. There was no apology in her eyes, no remorse, just satisfaction. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at the door. The last person I thought would throw me away was my father. But there I was, standing alone in the middle of the night, my life a wreckage of bad decisions, betrayal, and lies. The first few nights were brutal. I didn't have anywhere to go. My friends, they had their own families, their own problems. I didn't want to burden them with mine. So, I ended up in a dingy motel for a couple of weeks. My bank account drained from the rush of trying to get out of Dad's house. I kept my head down, tried to stay out of sight, but my life felt like a constant whisper of failure. And that was the easy part. The real struggle came when I had to start over, again. I was a 53-year-old woman who hadn't had a stable career in over 20 years, and the job market didn't have much interest in hiring someone like me. The low-paying grocery store job that had barely kept me afloat now seemed like a distant dream, and I couldn't bring myself to call anyone back. But then one afternoon when I was feeling especially low, something happened. I was sitting in that same dingy motel room, the bed unmade, staring at a screen that seemed to mock me. The job alerts, the rejection emails, the unpaid bills stacked on the side table, they all blurred together in a mess of unmet expectations. That's when my phone rang. It was Claire. I stared at the screen, frozen for a moment. What could she possibly want? The woman who had lied about me, gotten me kicked out, ruined everything. What was there left to say? I almost hit the decline button but hesitated. Maybe she felt guilty, I answered. "Hey, it's Claire," she said, her voice sounding oddly chipper. Too chipper. "What do you want?" I said, my tone sharp. She paused, probably surprised at my coldness. "I just thought maybe we could talk. I know things got heated, but cut the crap, I interrupted. You got me thrown out. Don't act like you care now. I could hear her take a deep breath on the other end. Listen, I'm not saying I didn't screw up, she said, her voice quieter now. But I need you to know that Dad is really upset. You have to make it right. Make it right after everything? How about you make it right, I said, bitterness slipping into my voice. You lied about me. You made him believe I was the bad guy when it was you the whole time. I didn't do anything wrong. There was a long pause. Then she spoke again, but this time I heard something else, something I didn't expect. I know, she said, sounding genuine. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did it. I just wanted to get him to see me as perfect. I don't know how it got so twisted. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. I could feel a mixture of anger and disbelief crawling under my skin. You think an apology is going to fix this? I don't know, she admitted. But maybe we can work it out. You can come back. Dad's been really upset, but he loves you deep down. My heart sank. She didn't get it. This wasn't about Dad loving me. It was about respect, about me finally standing up for myself. No, Claire, I'm done. I hung up before she could say another word, the silence in the room overwhelming. For the next few weeks, I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. I got a job at a diner. It was nothing glamorous, but it was something. I rented a small apartment in a cheap building not far from where I had been living before. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a tiny bit of control over my life again. But as I started to rebuild, I also began to plan. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about revenge. I had nothing to lose, and I was sick of being the one who had been wronged. I wasn't going to crawl back to them and beg for forgiveness. No. This time, I was going to make them regret how they treated me. I don't know what I was expecting when I showed up on their doorstep. Maybe some kind of satisfaction. Maybe I thought I'd feel like I'd won. But as I stood there in the rain, my fingers trembling just a little, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. It had been 6 months since they kicked me out, and not a word from Dad or Claire since. I knocked. The sound of it echoed on the porch, sharp in the evening air. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I shifted on my feet. I wasn't the same person who had left all those months ago, defeated and broken. Now I was stronger, more determined, and maybe a little bit hardened by everything that had happened. Claire opened the door. Her face went white when she saw me standing there, drenched from the rain. "You," she whispered, stepping back in surprise. "What are you doing here?" I could barely hide the small, almost satisfied grin that pulled at my lips. "I came to talk." "Dad's not home," she said quickly, as though that was somehow going to make everything easier. "I know," I said, stepping past her into the house. The place still smelled the same, that familiar scent of coffee and lemon-scented cleaners. It was like nothing had changed, but everything had. I had. What are you doing?" she asked, eyes wide. I crossed my arms. "I'm here to let you know that I'm not going to let this go. Not this time." She looked around, unsure what to say, then finally closed the door behind me. Her voice was shaky. This isn't going to fix anything. You're just going to make everything worse." I shook my head, taking a slow breath. "No, you're the one who made everything worse. And now I'm taking control. You don't get to do this to me and just walk away." Her eyes darted around, trying to figure out a way to deflect, but I wasn't having it. This time, I was the one in charge of the conversation. "You don't understand, do you?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You lied to him, you twisted everything, and when I needed someone the most, you turned your back on me. That's not something I'm going to forget." Claire opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The guilt was written all over her face, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to fix everything. I stepped forward. "I'm not leaving here until Dad understands what you did. You've ruined enough of my life. I won't let you do it anymore." Claire looked at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't even know who I was anymore. This isn't how you're going to get what you want. You think this is justice?" "I'm not looking for justice," I said, meeting her eyes. "I'm looking for something real. I want him to know what you did, and when he does, he'll see who you really are." She looked around, pacing, clearly desperate to avoid the conversation. "I'm not the enemy here," she said, her voice shaking. "You need to get over it. I didn't mean to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" I shot back. "Why did you lie about me to Dad? Why?" She flinched like I'd slapped her, but there was no apology in her eyes, just the same defensive walls she always built up. "I'm not doing this, okay?" she snapped, her tone rising. "You need to leave." I shook my head. "I'm not leaving until Dad knows everything, and when he knows, everything changes. I won't be the one you push around anymore." I didn't wait for her to respond. The tension in the room was thick, but I wasn't about to back down. This was it. This was the moment when everything would finally come to light. It wasn't long before Dad walked in, his face drawn and tired, as though life had been grinding him down just as much as it had me. He looked at us, then at the rain-soaked figure standing in his doorway. "What is this?" he asked, his voice gruff. "What's going on?" I stood up straighter, pushing all the hurt and anger down into something manageable. This was the moment. "Dad, I need to talk to you. It's about Claire." Dad's eyes flicked to Claire, then back to me. "I'm not in the mood for any more of this," he muttered. "No," I said, my voice firm. "You need to hear this. You've been lied to for months, by her." I pointed at Claire, whose face went pale. "I didn't," she began, but I cut her off. "Remember when you kicked me out and you said, 'Let's see how long she lasts'? That wasn't about me. That was about you picking sides. That was about you believing everything Claire told you. The truth is, she's the one who lied about me. She twisted everything, made me look like the villain." I could feel the heat rising in my chest as the words poured out. "But you didn't care enough to listen to me. You just believed her. And now look where we are." Dad's expression shifted. For the first time, I saw something different in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor. "She lied," I said again, quieter now, but still determined. "And I'm not the one who's going to let her get away with it." There was a long silence. It felt like an eternity, stretching and pulling the air tight until it felt like we were all suffocating. My eyes were locked on Dad's face, trying to read the unreadable. The anger I'd been holding in so tightly for months bubbled under the surface. I could see Claire's fingers twitching at her sides, the guilt she was desperately trying to keep hidden, slowly unraveling. Dad stood there for a moment, not saying a word. Finally, he let out a long, tired sigh and sank into the chair by the kitchen table. He looked smaller somehow, defeated in a way I had never seen him before. "I didn't know," he muttered, his voice low and broken. "I didn't know she'd do that. I thought you were just causing trouble like always." I felt something inside me snap. That was it. The excuse. The one I had lived with for years. "You thought I was always the problem," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "You never even gave me a chance to explain. You just believed everything she said. And now you're acting like I'm the one who destroyed everything?" Claire opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't let her. "You think it's easy for me, Dad?" I snapped, my anger flaring, my heart thumping in my chest. "I've spent the last year trying to keep it together, trying to get my life back, but I had to do it alone because you chose to believe her over me. You're my father, and you couldn't even see through her lies." He winced as though my words had physically struck him, and in a way they had. "I never thought it would go this far," he said quietly, his voice almost pleading. "I never wanted to hurt you." The weight of those words hung in the air like a dark cloud. I stared at him, feeling all the years of hurt pressing down on me. "I know," I said finally, my voice softer now. "But the damage is done, Dad. You pushed me away because of her. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough. And you were wrong." I could see the regret in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. Not for everything he'd done. Not for kicking me out. Not for allowing Claire's lies to become my reality. Claire shifted uncomfortably by the door, her eyes avoiding mine. "I didn't mean it, okay?" she said in a low voice, like she was trying to find the right words. "I was just so tired of being compared to you. I wanted Dad to see me, to think I was perfect. I didn't think it would go this far. And now look at us," I said, my voice hardening again. "You've torn this family apart. You wanted to be perfect so badly you destroyed everything that mattered. I didn't want this, she said, her voice breaking. Then why did you do it? I asked. Why lie? Why hurt me like this? There was a long pause. For the first time in years, I saw Claire for what she really was. Not the perfect daughter, not the golden child, but a person just as flawed as the rest of us. She was scared, and she had made a terrible mistake. I don't know, she admitted, her voice small now. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could make everything better by getting you out of the way. You didn't get me out of the way, Claire, I said, my voice steady. You just showed me how much I needed to fight for myself, and now that's what I'm doing. Claire lowered her head, the tears finally falling from her eyes. I could feel the tension in the room start to break apart, piece by piece, but it wasn't enough, not yet. Dad looked between us, his eyes still heavy with regret. I was wrong, he said finally. I should have listened to you. I should have been there for you. You weren't there, Dad, I said, my tone softening but still firm. And that's why this can't just go away with an apology. We've all got work to do. The silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't oppressive. This time, it felt like a moment of clarity. We weren't where we used to be, and we couldn't pretend that everything would be okay just because we said sorry. But it was a start. A small one, but it was something. I'm going to need time to forgive you, I said, the weight of those words sitting heavy on my chest. But I'll get there. We'll get there. Dad nodded slowly, his face lined with the weight of everything he had missed. I'll do better, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Claire wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. And I'll fix this. I will. I nodded once, then turned to leave. I didn't need to hear any more. I didn't need to see them react any further. What mattered now was the distance I had created between who I was then and who I was now. I had come back not to beg for forgiveness, but to reclaim my place, and in doing that, I had already won. I stepped out the door, the cool air hitting my face as I made my way back into the world. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But this time, I was in control. This time, I was the one who had the power. It was strange, returning to a place I thought I had left behind forever. But something had changed in me. I wasn't the same woman who had been forced out by lies and cruelty. I wasn't the woman who begged for forgiveness or cowered in the corner. I wasn't weak anymore, and I wasn't going to let them think I was. I spent the next few weeks navigating this strange in-between space. I wasn't living at home, but I wasn't completely severed from them either. Dad and Claire tried to reach out, cautiously at first, then with more earnestness. Claire even called to check in once, offering a hesitant apology. But it wasn't the apologies that mattered. It was the actions. I wasn't going to let this entire experience boil down to a few heartfelt words that didn't mean much if they weren't followed up with real change. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. I kept wondering if they really understood what had happened, or if they were just trying to move on for the sake of their own peace. One afternoon, I found myself back at the old house, standing on the doorstep once more. I had a new goal now, a different mission. I wasn't here to heal broken relationships or beg for a place at their table. I was here to prove something, not just to them, but to myself. The door creaked open, and there stood Claire again, her face a mix of surprise and apprehension. You again? I'm not here to talk about old wounds, I said, my voice firm, stronger than before. I'm here because I need something. She frowned, but there was something in her eyes, something like understanding, mixed with guilt. What is it? I want to work with Dad on a project, something that could get both of us back on our feet. Her expression changed, and I could see the confusion clouding her features. What do you mean? I sighed. I'm not asking for charity. I don't need your help, but I've got an idea, something that could make both our lives a little easier, something that would make Dad proud of me, but more importantly, it's something I can do on my own. She seemed to hesitate for a second, her eyes darting to the house behind her as if looking for some kind of approval. But then she stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. All right, I'm listening. As I sat across from Claire, I explained it all. The idea I had been brewing over the past few weeks. It was simple, really. A business, an online platform. Something where I could put all my experience, my skills to use, even if it wasn't glamorous. Something where I could start fresh independently. I can't do this alone, I said, meeting her eyes. But with Dad's support, I know we can make it happen. He's good with numbers, and I've got the creativity. We could put our differences aside long enough to get this off the ground, Claire. Claire sat back in her chair, clearly weighing the offer. You really think he'll agree? I don't know, I said honestly, but he has to. This isn't about family anymore. It's about doing something that matters for all of us. There was a long silence, and for a moment I wondered if I'd miscalculated, if all this talk about working together was just a fantasy, a way to patch things up that wasn't meant to be. But then Claire leaned forward, her hands on the table, eyes locked on mine. I'll talk to him, she said. But you have to understand something. You're not the only one who's changed. This isn't going to be some quick fix or some magic project that heals everything. But I think we can make this work. That was the moment, the turning point. We weren't just talking anymore. We weren't stuck in the past, locked in old patterns. We were actually planning something that could give us all a future. Not one built on lies or secrets, but one built on a new foundation. A foundation of respect. I'll hold you to that, I said, standing up to leave. Claire didn't say anything, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, mixed with something else. Maybe hope, maybe fear. I didn't know, but I wasn't waiting for her to decide. I was moving forward, with or without her. A few days later, I found myself standing in front of Dad's old desk, the one that hadn't been touched in months. The house felt eerily quiet as I sat down in the chair, staring at the papers he had left scattered on the surface. I had no idea where to begin, what to say, how to ask, but I had to do this. I had to convince him that this wasn't just about repairing broken ties. It was about giving both of us a second chance. Dad walked in just as I was about to get up. He looked tired, his usual stiff posture softened, his eyes showing the strain of his years. "What's this?" he asked, noticing the papers laid out before me. I cleared my throat, trying to sound confident despite the knots in my stomach. "This is the plan for the project." He raised an eyebrow. "I don't know about starting anything new right now. After everything that's happened, this isn't about starting something new because we're in a crisis," I said quickly. "This is about something that could actually work if you're willing to put the past behind us and focus on what's ahead." He stared at me for a long time, the silence stretching out. I could feel the weight of it in my chest. Finally, he sat down next to me. "I'm listening," he said. I smiled, a small victory. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we might just be able to fix this. Together. The day I'd been working toward had finally arrived. It wasn't the grand, cinematic moment I had once imagined, the moment where everything clicked into place with a single, victorious line of dialogue. No, it was quieter. It was the kind of moment that came after a long, drawn-out process of building, breaking, and rebuilding. It was raw and real, and in its own way, more powerful than any of the moments I'd fantasized about in the past. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the papers on the counter. The business plan, our plan, was ready. Dad had spent days poring over the numbers, tweaking things, ensuring it was something we could actually make work. He'd stopped treating me like the reckless daughter who always caused trouble. Instead, he was treating me like an equal, and that meant everything. Claire, on the other hand, had surprised me. She wasn't fully on board at first, understandably, but after spending hours with me, helping me flesh out the details, I saw a shift. She wasn't just playing the role of the obedient daughter anymore. She had a voice now. She was part of this plan, this future we were building together. "Is it ready?" Dad asked, walking into the room. His face was calm, but his eyes had a certain intensity to them that I hadn't seen in a long time. I nodded. "Yeah, I think so. I'll make the first call, get the ball rolling." Claire came in just then, glancing between Dad and me. "We're doing this?" "We are," I said, a grin tugging at my lips. "No turning back now." Claire shifted her weight, her arms crossed. "What about her?" I knew she meant the one we never talked about, the one who had kicked me out, the one who had lied. "She's not part of this," I said firmly. "This is about us. This is about rebuilding what we've lost, not dragging the past back into it. Dad cleared his throat. We'll do it together. I'm in. I won't make the same mistake again. And just like that, it was official. We were starting something new. Not just a business, but a life. A life that wasn't tainted by the past. A life that was ours, together. But as we stood there, about to take the first step into this new future, I realized something. There would always be a part of me that could never forget what had happened. What Claire had done, what Dad had allowed. That part of me would never fully heal. But that didn't matter anymore. I had learned to live with it. I had learned to take the power back from the lies. And that was worth more than any apology. The first call I made was to a supplier. It wasn't a big deal, but it was the first step. And as I hung up the phone, I could feel something inside me shift, a weight being lifted. We had a long way to go. There would be setbacks, there would be failures. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying the burden alone. That night, after everything was done, after the first orders were placed and our plan was officially in motion, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee. Claire and Dad were in the other room, talking quietly. I could hear their voices drifting in and out, but I didn't need to listen closely. I knew they were figuring things out, and I knew we were all going to be okay. I stood up, my hand resting on the counter as I looked out the window at the darkened street outside. A feeling of peace washed over me. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the ideal outcome I had once imagined in my mind, but it was real, and it was mine. I had come full circle. I had returned, not to beg, not to be humiliated, but to take what was mine. And in doing so, I had discovered something even more valuable, my own strength. I turned away from the window, a smile curling at my lips. There was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the future. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. And in that moment, I realized that the real victory wasn't in revenge. It wasn't in proving anyone wrong. It was in finding peace with myself, in reclaiming what I deserved. Before I left, I walked into the living room where Dad and Claire were sitting, the atmosphere now lighter, filled with tentative hope. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "Let's get to work. The future's waiting." Dad looked up, his expression soft but filled with something I hadn't seen in him before. Pride. "We've got this." Claire smiled, her eyes not just apologetic, but determined now. "Yeah, we do." And as the three of us sat there together, ready to take on the future we had built from the ruins of the past, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what happened next, I had already won.